President Trump's newly created Board of Peace met in Washington, D.C. to discuss the reconstruction efforts in Gaza. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. And we did learn of a monetary commitment towards rebuilding.
Right.
Tell us more about the new developments today.
Yeah, so latest stuff that came out of the meeting with the Board of Peace today. President Trump said the U.S. would commit $10 billion and member states of the Board of Peace pledged $7 billion in humanitarian and reconstruction aid for the Gaza Strip and the Palestinians living there, according to multiple reports. It wasn't specified, though, which member nations were making the pledges for reconstruction or which ones would contribute more of a boots-on-the-ground stabilization presence there in Gaza. But Indonesia's military said they'd be ready to send 8,000 of its troops to Gaza by the end of June as part of a humanitarian and peace mission. So we're going to have to wait and see how this all transpires over the coming months.
And obviously, we have seen the video and the images coming out of Gaza just showing the catastrophic damage here.
Yeah.
What are the latest cost estimates to rebuild?
It's devastating. So according to the UN, destruction across Gaza is now in the 84% region, and in other parts, more like 92%. It's just completely flattened. It's truly devastating to see this destruction. From these estimates, urban destruction like this really hasn't happened since the sieges in Ukraine that happened at the very beginning of that war. And before that, you'd really have to go all the way back to World War II to see things like this. The UN estimates, though, it's going to cost around $70 billion to rebuild Gaza, and $20 billion is needed just in the first 3 years just to start the recovery.
And that $70 billion, I mean, that figure just really puts into perspective this new commitment we learned about today.
Absolutely.
Emma, thank you.
Thanks.
For more on this Fact Check team topic, Emma's going to join us to dig deeper into the humanitarian crisis happening in Gaza and how the rest of the world is planning to respond. The ceasefire in Gaza may be holding for now, but the scale of the damage is becoming more clear, and the cost to rebuild, it could be staggering. This comes as President Trump pledged $10 billion, and the Board of Peace is pledging $7 billion in aid for the Gaza Strip reconstruction efforts. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. What are officials saying it will cost, what it will take to rebuild, I should say, considering the catastrophic damage?
Yeah, it really is catastrophic, especially seeing these images come out of Gaza. It's devastating. So according to the UN, Gaza needs around $70 billion to rebuild. The UNDP's representative for the Palestinians say that roughly 84% of the Gaza Strip has been damaged, and in some areas like Gaza City, destruction really may be as high as 92%. Remember, Gaza is only about 25 miles long and just a few miles wide, so that means that the damage is pretty much across the majority of the territory.
And tell us about the efforts that are going on now in the interim while they wait for this reconstruction funding.
Yeah, so right now the focus is really on stabilizing the situation before rebuilding even begins. UNDP teams say they're working with humanitarian groups to provide clean water, medical supplies, and emergency jobs. But also something people don't always think about is just the amount of work that it takes to clear the massive amounts of rubble. Officials say they've already removed about 81,000 tons of debris, roughly 3,100 truckloads, just to open up roads so they can reach people and hospitals can start to function again. The International Committee of the Red Cross says that aid workers are also struggling to get supplies safely to civilians. And in some cases, people have been wounded or killed just trying to reach these distribution sites.
And you raise a critical point that there are so many steps that need to happen before there's even the rebuilding, before
Absolutely.
they even get to that point. Emma, thank you. Presidential polling from Gallup is coming to an end after nearly 9 decades. For years, Gallup has been the gold standard for measuring how Americans feel about the president. Let's go to Morgan Stevens from the Fact Check team. And Morgan, I know that you looked into how President Trump's approval rating varies state by state. What did you find?
Sure. While Gallup is stepping away from polling, there's still plenty of other firms that are really tracking these numbers. We looked at data from Civics today, and the state-by-state breakdown is pretty striking. It really depends on where you live. States that voted for Kamala Harris in 2024, they're tending to show weaker approval ratings for President Trump. The lowest was in Hawaii, where his net approval sits at -58. On the other end, deep red states that backed him by a wide margin are still showing strong support. In West Virginia, for example, his net approval is +25, the highest in the country.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. I know that the approval rating doesn't always mirror voter behavior, but I am curious, in the states where President Trump did flip red in the election, are we still seeing strong support for the president?
There are a few, but they're really tight races to begin with. When we compared the swing states Trump won in 2024 to today, we found Alaska, Arizona, Nevada, Texas, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Georgia now showing a negative approval rating. But this really isn't a huge shock. States like Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin are true purple states, politically divided and often decided by thin margins. So it makes sense their numbers are more mixed. It's unclear, though, just how many of those who were once Trump voters are now disillusioned with him in this data.
We know that you will continue to track it. Morgan, thank you. A little later on, Emma Withrow will join us with a look at which presidents have had the highest and lowest approval ratings. Gallup is officially calling it quits, tracking presidential approval ratings. This comes after around 90 years of gauging how the public feels about the White House. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. And I know, Emma, that you dug into the history of presidential approval ratings, which, as we said, is a tradition that goes back decades.
Yeah, dating back to the 1930s, actually. So George Gallup, he founded the American Institute of Public Opinion, which later turned into Gallup as we know it. And they conducted the first ever public opinion presidential poll in 1939. So they asked Americans the question, you know, how do you approve or disapprove of the way that the president's handling the job? At the time, they were asking about FDR. And according to the American Presidency Project at UCSB, around 69% of Americans approved of FDR. So his approval ratings averaged extremely high throughout his presidency due to things like the New Deal programs, his fireside chats that he became famous for, and also obviously his leadership during World War II, which kind of united everyone together.
And as far as Gallup polling goes, Emma, which presidents have had the highest and lowest approval ratings in the history of this since they started the tracking?
So it's quite the range, and it's interesting to see how it varies. Gallup says that the highest job approval rating for any president was 90% for George W. Bush after 9/11 happened. Behind Bush is Harry Truman with 87%. During that early post-World War II period, he was getting those approval ratings. Coming in third was JFK with 83%. That was in 1961. Interestingly enough, though, when you look at the lowest approval ratings, Truman also tops that list. So a lot can change in a couple of years, obviously. He polled at 22% approval in 1952. Richard Nixon follows behind him. He was polling at like 24% during the Watergate crisis right before he resigned. And then also on that list, again, for lowest approval ratings was George W. Bush, who polled at 25% during the 2008 financial crisis.
It's such an interesting look back and in hindsight to see all of this, and now the end of an era. Emma, thank you.
Thanks.
President Trump is ordering the Pentagon to buy more electricity from coal plants, part of a broader push to boost the struggling industry. Let's bring in Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. So I know that an executive order is a big part of all of this. Tell us more about how it's setting this into motion.
So the core move is that executive order, like you mentioned. It's basically directing the Defense Department to sign long-term power contracts with coal-fired plants to supply military installations. The admin, though, says the goal here is to really make sure that bases and defense facilities have some reliable, always available electricity, what they call baseload power. And the White House fact sheet says that the order itself is about grid resilience and national security, arguing that intermittent energy sources like wind and solar can't always provide the on-demand power that they're looking for. So.
And President Trump, I mean, he has been pushing to revamp the coal industry. Are these military purchase agreements, is that actually big enough, though, to make a dent?
So this is part of the problem. So analysts told the New York Times that even if the military got all of its electricity from coal, it would pretty much only account for about 3% of the U.S. coal-powered capacity. So this won't revive the entire industry by any means, but it could keep some specific plants from closing, especially the ones that are close to the military bases. Plus, the Energy Department, they also just announced about $175 million to extend the life of coal plants in a few different states like Kentucky, West Virginia, and the Tennessee Valley Authority also has delayed the retirement of 2 major coal plants. So there's definitely efforts to keep these going there. So when you put it all together, the admin is really just using procurement, funding, and regulatory policies kind of all at once combined to slow down coal's decline.
All right, Emma, thank you. A little later on, Emma's going to join us again to explain why coal and why now. The Trump administration says its new coal push will help keep the lights on and protect American jobs. But many energy experts say the industry's decline is about economics, not just policy. Let's go to Emma Withrow with the Fact Check team. And for many, the data shows that coal has been falling out of favor, but isn't a big part of that simply the competition?
Yeah, so the big reason here is really the market forces that are at play. Utilities have been closing coal plants for years because natural gas, wind, and solar have really been cheaper to run or even just build in general. And a lot of these coal plants are just old, kind of average age for them is around 40 years old. So they're getting up there, which means that maintenance costs are rising. So it's just a lot more expensive and has a lot more issues when it comes to running and building them.
So you talk about cost, and I know that that has come up a lot, but the administration is arguing that coal provides reliability.
Yeah.
Any truth to that?
So there's definitely context with that part of it. So during extreme cold weather, coal plants can sometimes provide some steady power when wind or solar output drops, something that the president pointed out in his recent remarks when he signed this executive order. But grid experts told the New York Times that reliability today really depends on a mix of factors, things like transmission, storage, and flexible generation, not just one fuel source. Coal, though, in general accounts for only about 18% of U.S. electricity, which is a big drop from what we've seen in the past. So experts say that federal support might delay some of these plant closures, but it probably won't change the long-term trend toward these cheaper energy sources.
All right, good background. Emma, thank you. Kim Jong-un is rumored to be setting the stage for his 13-year-old daughter to succeed him and continue the Kim family lineage in North Korea. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. What are the latest signs that this actually could happen? I know that you've been pouring into the reports, and then part B of this is, what does that transfer of power actually look like?
Right. So she hasn't been named any sort of official capacity quite yet, but all signs are really pointing to Kim Jong-un positioning her to take over the North Korean dynasty. Very little is known about his daughter. What we do know, though, is that she'll likely attend the ruling Workers' Party Congress, Kim Jong-un's autocratic party that's going to happen this month. It's kind of a large-scale political event where the public gets potentially a first glimpse of her in an official capacity, as also as a point where they really lay out the goals, their policy goals going forward. The regime does. This is where her path to succession would become more solidified. So it's not exactly clear how this is all going to play out. We're going to have to just wait and see what comes out of it.
What is clear is that documenting her presence and appearances like that and images like that is happening more and more. And if this does happen, Emma, it would be a very unusual move.
It would, yeah. It's extremely rare, especially in North Korea. We know North Korea is very much a patriarchal society. They haven't ever had a female leader, but Kim Jong-un would be joining a short list of fathers to select their daughters to fill their shoes. So just taking a look back into recent history, first you have the UK's Queen Elizabeth II, who was the successor to King George. Then there's France's Marie Le Pen, daughter of Jean-Marie Le Pen, who took over leadership of the National Front Party. And then Aung San Suu Kyi of Myanmar, the daughter of a revolutionary leader who became the de facto leader of the country. So this has happened in the past, but it's more interesting to see it happening in a place like North Korea.
Yeah, very rare. Emma, thank you.
Thanks.
A little later on, Emma will be back to break down the history of the Kim dynasty. Rumors of Kim Jong-un's daughter becoming the next supreme leader are swirling after multiple appearances and intelligence gathered from inside North Korea. She would be the fourth supreme leader of the Kim dynasty in a country plagued with human rights abuses and strict censorship. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. And when we talk about North Korea, for many, images come to mind. We hear about the human rights abuses. Break down what has been officially documented.
So the most serious findings come from a United Nations report. It was an investigation that was conducted, which concluded that the North Korean government has committed what it called systemic and widespread human rights abuses, some that may amount to crimes against humanity. The UN points to a few core issues here, so let's go through these. So first, political prison camps. They say tens of thousands of people are believed to be held in camps where forced labor, torture, and starvation have been reported. Second, we have extreme limits on just basic freedoms. The U.S. State Department and Freedom House say that North Koreans can be punished for criticizing the government, practicing religion, or even just having foreign media.
What about public executions and defectors? We hear about that a lot.
Yeah, it's devastating. So there's documentation there as well. I mean, the UN Special Rapporteurs and Human Rights Watch report that they reported that public executions have been used for crimes like just trying to flee the country or distributing foreign content. There's also reports that the state's policies on food distribution and social class, known as this specific type of system, they can determine who gets access to just food, jobs, and education. The World Food Program also continues to report that there's chronic food shortages that are happening in the country. A lot of different issues here, well documented. So
Emma, thank you. Interesting discussion.
Yeah.
And for more on this Factor Team topic, including links to Emma's sources, just scan that QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com.